Morning all, Brian S. Pratt here. Going to read chapter 28 of Fires of Prophecy, book 2 of the Morsai Saga. We only have one more chapter and then the epilogue, and then we're done. So today's Thursday, Friday will be the last, and then I won't be doing another one until I get Relic of the Ancients done. Once that's done, then I'll start it on Warrior Priest. But here goes chapter 28. After days of working in the mines, his hands had toughened and the sores began forming calluses. A friendship had developed with Nate. Each helped the other as needed. Even though the work was hard, he found himself proud when his team achieved their quota for the day. There were dozens of teams throughout the mines, and a rough score was kept telling how well each team consistently met their quotas. His team, while the first having been low in the rankings due to the loss of men and the new ones joining, had since steadily climbed toward the lead team spot. Essen, though tough and strict, had been fair in his dealings with his men. Since coming to join Essen's team, there had been 2 cave-ins, including the one that occurred on the first day. The second, the team caught beneath the falling rocks, hadn't been so lucky and were crushed and killed. Michael's team hadn't been the ones sent to help dig out those poor souls, but they had heard of it through the gossip channels later when leaving for the night. Every other day or so, Blacktooth made an appearance to give them their water and bread. His scowls became so common now that Michael no longer bothered with them. That Michael was no longer bothered by them. Lately, when they left the mines at night, Blacktooth could be seen hanging around some of the supervisors, talking and joking with them. Whenever he saw Michael, though, his smile faded and hatred crept into his features. He absent-mindedly rubbed his stump while looking at Michael, almost as if unconsciously reliving the day he had lost his hand. But Michael no longer feared him. He was never far from his team, and he knew they would stand by him should things ever get ugly between him and Blacktooth. A day ago, when bread and water was brought to them by someone other than Blacktooth, Michael had bitten into his bread and felt a sharp, jabbing sensation. He reached in and pulled out a sharp rock, stained with blood from where it had punctured his tongue. If he would have swallowed it, it would have most likely torn his insides apart. He had taken it to Essen, who then proceeded to yell at the man who had brought it. The man said he didn't know how it made its way into the bread, but that he would look into it when he got back. Later that day, when they were leaving the mines, Michael saw Blacktooth standing near the kitchen building, talking to the one who had brought the bread down to them. He pointed them out to Nate, who said, "Apparently, he's not through trying to get you, and he's enlisting aid." "What can I do?" Shrugging, he said, "Nothing to do. Just watch out until you have proof to bring to Essen." Michael kept glancing over to Blacktooth until his team reached their room and went inside for the night. The following morning, after returning to the mines, all went as usual, and they were able to maintain their pace to achieve their quota for the day. The day passed uneventfully as they loaded wagon after wagon full of ore. James and Jaron looked out from the woods toward the smelting complex. 6 buildings belched smoke from tall smokestacks, and wagons were unloaded into smaller carts, which were then taken inside. Several smaller auxiliary buildings surrounded them. While they watched, 2 wagons entered the complex from a road on the far side and made their way toward one of the smelters. "That road must lead to Myco." Jerome nodded. "Let's work our way around to it." Nodding, James made to move when he was stopped by Jerome's hand on his shoulder. He glanced back as Jerome indicated a group of workers walking along the side of a nearby building. Remaining motionless, they waited until the men moved to the door in the side of the building and entered. Working their way through the edge of the forest, they circumvented the smelting complex and came to the road. At the road, they paused as they looked both ways. Not seeing anyone, they stepped out of the trees. James said, "Let's take the road, it'll be faster." "All right, but we better keep our eyes open." They traveled down the road for 100 feet before James suddenly took him by the arm and whispered, "Someone's coming." Up the road, movement could be seen. James followed him into the road, where they crouched behind some bushes and trees to wait. Shortly, they heard the unmistakable sound of a horse-drawn wagon coming toward them down the road. When the wagon reached them, they found it to be heaped full of ore from the mine, heading for the smelters. Aside from the driver, 2 guards with crossbows rode upon the wagon. After the wagon passed and had moved out of sight, they returned to the road and continued toward the mine. An hour later found them coming to the stockade walls surrounding it. It appeared out of the forest and then turned to run along at the edge of the road. They entered the forest on the opposite side of the road from the wall before coming into view of the guards patrolling along the top. Keeping well within the woods, they made their way slowly alongside the road, all the while staying out of sight of the guards atop the wall. When they reached the area directly across from the gate, they stopped and from a hidden location watched the guards atop the gate. The guards were fairly lax in their duty. Most of the time was spent either engaged in conversation with the guard next to them or looking within the compound. Only occasionally did anyone glance to the outside along the road and into the forest. Looks like they're not too concerned about an attack from the outside, Jerome whispered to James. I think they are more there to keep people in than out, reasoned James. Jerome looked at him and nodded. That should make this all the easier then. Let's hope so, he replied. Then he asked, Can you get in? Shaking his head, he said, Not with all those guards on the wall. They would spot me for sure. Let me take a look and see if there might be any place that would be less visible. Should I go with you? No, he answered. I can move a lot quieter and quicker if I'm by myself. Just stay here and keep an eye on the gate. See if you can determine any kind of routine for the guards. All right, he said. You be careful. This isn't like sneaking around a city. I will, he assured him, and then moved away from James, keeping in the trees to avoid detection. When he had gone far enough beyond the point where the wall turned back into the forest, he quickly rushed across the road and vanished into the trees on the other side. James caught his breath when he saw him cross, sure that a guard on the wall would see him. He looked to the wall, but the guards were too engrossed with the conversation to have noticed. Hoping he would find a way in, James sat back against a tree and made himself comfortable while waiting for his return. Keeping a watch on the gate and the guards on the wall, he quickly realized there wasn't any sort of routine or pattern. They simply stood there and conversed among themselves, as well as others within the compound. One thing James had noticed was that there were always 4 guards atop the gate. Jordan had been gone an hour when the gate opened and 3 wagons heavy with ore exited. The wagons turned south and rolled down the road toward the smelters. While the gate was open, James looked within but wasn't able to see much more than some buildings scattered about. He did see other guards about the place. 5 others beside the ones on top of the wall. Once the last wagon had exited, the gate swung closed. With the gate closed, there was little for him to do other than sit back and wait for Jerome's return. A hand touching his shoulder jolted him awake. Startled, he found Jerome had returned. Wake up, Jerome said with a smile as he sat next to him. What did you find? Just more of the same wall completely encircling the entire encampment, he said. Each section had guards patrolling the top, which will make any attempt to gain entry difficult at best. James gestured to the wall before them and said, There are only 4 on patrol above the gate at any given time. That's about what it is on the other side as well, he explained. Most of them seem to be totally unconcerned with what went on outside of the walls. I noticed that too, said James. Probably no one has ever tried to break in before. Most likely, agreed Jerome. That should make our job that much easier. What's the plan? Jerome sat and thought for a moment before saying, I really want to know what's on the other side of those walls. If I knew that, I would better know from where to attempt to gain entry. How about climbing a tree, suggested James. That should raise you high enough to see within the walls. His eyes widened like he had never even considered the option. Nodding, he said as he looked around the forest, You might have something there. He got to his feet and searched for a suitable tree that was both tall enough and placed so he would be able to see over the walls without being observed. Why didn't he use a mirror? He's been using his mirror to track things all this time, and now all of a sudden he doesn't think about it. I think that was a gaffe on my part. I should have used the mirror, but I didn't, so I'm gonna leave it. When he finally located one, he said to James, Be right back. Then he walked quietly through the forest until he came to it. The tree stood about 30 feet from where the wall turned from the road back into the forest. Jumping up, he grabbed hold of one of the lower branches and swung himself up. James alternated between watching him climb and keeping an eye on the guards, all the while praying that Jerome would remain unobserved. The guards, totally oblivious to what was happening in the tree near them, continued speaking among themselves. James then glanced back to Jerome and saw that he had reached a height that would afford him a good view of the compound's interior. He settled into the crook of a branch and stayed up there quite a while before beginning his ascent back to the ground. Once down, he made his way to James. Well, we have a lot of guards within the walls, he explained. 30 or more. I couldn't get an exact count. That, of course, doesn't include those within the mine. He took a stick and drew a diagram of the compound on the ground. He drew the wall and a large pit in the middle and large rectangles around the pit. There's a large pit in the middle, most likely the entrance to the mines. Pointing to the rectangles around the pit, he said, "These look to be quarters for the slaves and perhaps other auxiliary buildings, similar to the ones we saw back at the smelters." "Did you see any of the slaves?" "A few, but the majority must still be within the mine." He sat back and rested for a moment. "I'll go back up the tree and stay there till nightfall just to see if things change. Then we can determine what we want to do." "All right," agreed James, anxious now that he was closer to freeing Michael. Jerome reached into his pouch and handed some dried beef to James. "Here." Taking it, James asked, "Where did you get this?" "Found it on Christo's boat," he explained with a grin. James tore off a bite and chewed. It was a little tough, but not that bad. Jerome handed him another chunk, and they had a quick meal before he returned to the tree to watch the compound. While he ate, the gate opened, and another 5 wagons departed and rolled down the road toward the smelters. "They get a lot of iron from here, don't they?" he observed, a thoughtful look coming to him. Nodding, James replied, "Yeah, I've been watching the wagons leave all day." "Why?" "No reason." Finishing up, Jerome got back to his feet and returned to the tree, where he again climbed up to keep an eye on what went on inside the walls. "Boys," Essen announced as the last wagon of the day rolled away, "I believe that puts us close to being the best team in the mines." A cheer erupted from the men. Michael felt pride as Nate slapped him on the back and gave him a grin. "Your hard efforts have not gone unnoticed, and tonight you will not find the usual fare brought to your quarters. Tonight you will have beef and wine." A gasp escaped some of the men at the news. For those who've been here the longest, beef and wine were 2 things they had all but forgotten. Michael's stomach cramped and growled at the thought. "If we can continue as we have," Essen told him, "you can expect similar feasts in the future." A shout erupted from the men as he turned and led them from the mine. Michael was happy. If this was to be his lot for the rest of his life, well, at least it could be much worse. A good crew to work with and an understanding boss, what more could a slave ask? True, the work was hard and at times unforgiving, but the men he worked with made it bearable. As they continued through the mines, Essen turned his head back and said, "For the number 1 team, they'll give you women once a month as long as you keep being the best." The men gave out with another cheer and promised to be the best. As they left the mine and headed back to their quarters, Michael's jubilation was again dampened by the sight of Blacktooth carrying a water pail passed on his way into the mines. But even his scout wasn't enough to wreck this day for him. In the back of his mind, he wondered what James was doing and how he was getting along. He didn't hold ill will toward him. Michael knew that he was just a boy off the streets, not worth risking one's life for. He returned to the present as they entered their room and found the food waiting for them. The older one snatched the jugs of wine first, but Michael didn't care. His stomach growled mildly at the sight of the juicy, roasted beef sitting in heaping mounds on the platter. He grabbed several thick slices and took a bite. The juices from the beef ran down his chin, making tracks in the dust and dirt that coated his face and neck. For his crew of 12, there were 6 jugs of wine, one of which had already been consumed by the others. Nate said to them, "Say something for Michael. He's earned it too." "Sure thing," said Fez, one of the old timers. He went and slapped Michael on the back as he offered the jug. "Here you go, Michael, me lad." Michael took the jug and had just a small drink before giving it back to Fez. He glanced over to Nate, who gave him a grin. Nate was being moderate with the wine as well, taking only occasional sips as he could concentrate mainly on the meat and loaves of bread. When Michael finished his 5th slice of bread, he noticed that Fez was behaving erratically. At first, he assumed it was due to the large amount of wine he'd consumed. But then he tipped over and everyone started laughing at his antics, thinking he had drunk too much. Concerned, Michael went to him and tried to wake him up. "Fez," he said, shaking his shoulder. "Leave him be," one of the others said. "He'll soon sleep it off." But something just didn't feel right. Shaking him harder, he called his name louder. "Fez!" Turning to Nate, he said, "I think he's dead." As Nate went over to him, another man staggered and fell to the floor. Sudden pain ripped through Michael's stomach as he watched Nate stumble and fall as his stomach too cramped with pain. "Poison!" Nate cried out, holding his stomach as the pain again ripped through him. "Poison!" Michael thought as he reached Nate. Then his mood darkened as he realized the truth. Blacktooth. And there ends chapter 28. Everyone's poisoned. Blacktooth's going to kill everybody off, right? And we got James and Jerome outside trying to get in. And isn't that the way? At the height of your jubilation is when the world pulls the rug out from underneath you. So everyone's dropping dead. Michael's sick. Nate's sick. Guards are everywhere. Blacktooth's running wild. We'll hit chapter 29 or 28 tomorrow. I'm gonna cut wood today. Take my chainsaw out to the woods. I'm gonna cut me down a tree. See, I got these big trees. These really big trees. And like my kid's grandpa Ralph, he always said, Brian, don't ever cut down a big tree, because if you cut one down, you'll never see it again. Because in our lifetime, they won't grow back. It takes too long to grow a great big tree, right? So what I'm doing is a fire came through here and burnt almost everything down about 15 years ago. Now we have all these smaller trees built up, but we have a few of these great big ones still around. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at how far the branches are out, and I go about 5 feet beyond that, and I just clear everything out, just open it up so they can grow big and full. I've got 2 trees in the back. They are humongous trees. I mean, it'd take 3 people holding hands to put your arms around them. That's how big they are. It's really cool. And so I'm creating these for my kids, my grandkids. Maybe they will enjoy them too, until the next fire comes and takes them out. But that's all right. Nature will do what nature will do, and we'll just have to do the best we can to preserve what we can. I think that's it. Going to Six Flags is on the 28th. I'll be in Chickasha, going to Ben and Jay's. My son and I, possibly a couple other people maybe, are going to go to Ben and Jay's Pizza in Chickasha, 1 o'clock. See, they're only open from 11 to 2. So if you get there at 1 o'clock, Ben and Jay's, stay till 2, they close. Now when they close, unlike every other pizza buffet I've ever seen, if there's pizza on the buffet, they'll give you a box, say take home what you want. So I always make sure I get there at 1 o'clock, eat my fill, and then take pizza home with me. I love that place. And by 2 o'clock, hardly anyone's there. Most people probably don't even realize that happens. But yep. So I bring home some pizza for my mom, because she doesn't go. She's 81. She doesn't like to travel. She doesn't have to. I mean, I could drive all day along for road trips. And then later we're going to go to Six Flags. All right, we're having pizza on the 28th. The 31st, Sunday, I believe Wednesday, the 31st. See, so this coming Sunday is Ben and Jay's in Chickasha, Oklahoma, at 1 o'clock. And then on the 31st, Wednesday the 31st, we're going to Six Flags Over Texas. We always get there about an hour before it opens. So if you get there, if you want to meet me or whatever, look for the hat. I don't think I'll be wearing this because it's probably about 95 degrees there. So I think I'll just be in a dark t-shirt. I'll have a backpack on, and there'll be pops hanging off the straps. So if you see a chubby old guy with a Morsite hat on, backpack, walking down Six Flags Over Texas in Arlington, Texas, on the 31st, that's me. I'm bringing my phone. I'm making some TikToks. My most popular TikTok, I mean, it's gotten like 15,000 views already, and it gets likes daily. Is I talk about how there's a fill the thrill station and all they do is refill pop. But every place else also does pop too, so you can still bring your cups up and get it refilled. And I was saying, see, if you look at this place over here for Fill the Thrill, 10 people in line. But if you go over here, there's nobody. Over here, 10 people. Over here, there's nobody. So don't just stand there. Go someplace that has a short line and go enjoy yourself. And people seem to really like that. And I've got a lot of good comments on that one too. Yeah, I better shut it down. Girlfriend says I talk too much. Y'all take care. We'll do chapter 29 tomorrow.